What's going on, world? I'm Ace. So, I went to a meeting earlier, and I didn't say anything. But my friend Milo was at my house, and I had a lengthy conversation, we'll call it, with him. And what was amazing to me was the fact. Now, Milo is a big believer in the 12 steps and the program, if you will. And I am not. And what blew my mind, this is crazy. What blew my mind was the fact that Milo, I'm giving him the actual definition of religion and the definition of spiritual, right? A religious experience versus a spiritual experience, okay? I am literally giving him the definition, stating that anything that has a set of traditions or rituals, steps, or doctrine, the book, right? If this experience is brought on by any of those, the doctrine, the traditions, the rituals, right? Something outside of self, that is a religious experience. Spiritual experience comes from within, right? So the search for purpose within, right? No doctrine, no rituals, no, if you will, nothing outside of self, okay? Simple. Seems like a pretty straightforward concept, right? Okay. Once again, religious, something that utilizes a superior power, a deity, a higher power / God, traditions, rituals, meetings, has a book or doctrine that basically says this is the way you do something, right? This is the way you practice this religion. That is a religious experience. Religion. No M, just an N. Religion. Whereas spiritual experience, well, again, none of the above. No deity, no words on a page, no rituals. It is an experience that comes from within, right? The search for purpose within, spiritual, okay? Now, given these two separate, okay, by definition, ideas, because Milo had attributed this experience that he had upon completing the 12 steps. So the 12 steps brought this on. He, without question, believed that it was a spiritual experience. The definition's right in front of him. It's clearly, by the criteria, a religious experience. Except AA, or 12-step programs, if you will, disguise it as spiritual. they're almost complete opposites. But yet, I bet if you have been through the 12 steps and you understand it, that you also have been indoctrinated into believing that you were doing a spiritual program, yet the definition and all the criteria meet a religious program disguised as a spiritual one. Do the research yourself. This is facts based in the world that we live in constants, okay? Again, we breathe air. I can't breathe water. I'm not a fish, nor a marshmallow. Understand this. We need to have a general consensus, which we do. It's called the dictionary, okay? These are what these words mean, okay? So when AA is, or NA, or non, or whatever, the 12-step program, clearly must have a dictionary on hand somewhere, right? If not, the internet, right? Maybe, I hope so. Yeah, they do. So, they are lying, okay? Because they know the difference, or they have the duty as a entity, right, to provide accurate information, right? Even if it were a religious one, even if it were a spiritual one, they have a duty to provide accurate information so that people can accurately decide on the course that they want to take, but they don't. This is my issue. You disguise it as one thing, yet do another. So the 12-step program is not walking its talk. Its talk is completely different than its walk. See, everything it says it is tends to be a contradiction or a lie, right? But everything it does shoots towards religious. I would not, and this is not a little, spirituality can mean a whole bunch of things. It definitely doesn't mean religious, okay? They're two separate words. They're two separate definitions, okay? There's a reason for this, okay? Based in logic and reasoning, common sense, they're two different things. But yet AA would say, it's not a religious program, it's a spiritual program. And you're a goddamn fucking liar. That's what you are. You're lying to people actively. And that's fucked up. That's sad. How many people would you lose if you actually said you were a religious program like you are? In fact, 11 of the 12 steps mention God or higher power, which is a deity that you don't have to believe in, but you have to believe in. In fact, in order to do the steps, you have to give up your will and your being and your power away, which is impossible, but yet you have these people trying to do it. The very act of giving away or admitting you're powerless gives you power. You can't give it away. So what this happens is, in a normal brain, if I were to, I don't know, let's say, talk about the many, many contradictions or lies, right? A walk not matching a talk that a 12-step program such as AA would try and promote. Well, the brain, like I'll give you an example. How about that? Let's go with all right. we'll start at its core. What could possibly derail a logical thought based in reality and used reasoning to figure out? What could short circuit the brain into thinking that something illogical or something nonsensical would actually make sense or was logical? There's actually a psychological effect that does this, right? Now, the 12 steps, 12 traditions, 12 promises are riddled. The program, right? The program of the 12 steps, the 12 traditions, and the 12 promises, riddled inside and out by contradiction, right? Now, these contradictions play a psychological role in the reasoning behind why Milo, giving the facts, giving the definitions of them, could not make the connection that everything that they're doing is religious, yet what they're saying and calling it is spiritual, right? Why he couldn't make this connection is because the contradictions create a double bind, cognitive dissonance, right? It short circuits a brain that, when coming in, from, say, detox or into a new state of being, the newcomer, if you will, freshly sober, right? They're already pretty much short-circuited because of the way that the brain needs to reset itself and go from the survival mode of the center of the brain to the frontal cortex, the logic and reasoning part. So it's already kind of messed up, right? So not only that, they hijacked and short-circuited is more of the term, the logic and reasoning, to bypass logic and reasoning, to implement the contradictions that the 12 steps, 12 traditions, and 12 promises psychologically bring about, right? And because of this, any belief that has been attributed to self-erasure, breaking someone down, identity distortion, shame reinforcement, authority dependence, and suppression of autonomy. Excuse me. Automatically gets inputted as you're going through the 12 steps, just by going through them and doing them. You don't even realize that it's happening because of the fact that the contradictions shut down. They allow these other beliefs and these ideas that literally make no sense, that go nowhere, to say that you're not doing anything. It's the program that's doing it. Even though you're doing all the work, right? You're getting up at, you got a 4 a.m. mentality, or you get up at 4 a.m., you're getting your day started, you're doing what you need to do in order to benefit or better yourself and those around you, right? If you don't better yourself, you're no good to anybody else around you. So always focus on yourself first, right? Which is the exact opposite of what AA tells you to do, right? It says, give up your power and pray. Whereas the most logical thing to do would be build your intellect, build your logic, hardwire these logic and reasoning factors better, and build your intellect and build your emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual fortitude, right? Build that up. But it doesn't. Not only does it not, it shames you if you try. So if you try to utilize your will, the thing that keeps you going and makes you you, they say, no, 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 no. That's bad. That's bad. Don't do that. You could die if you use your brain. Look, your brain got yourself here. Did it? Because if God's will, right, I'm supposed to give my will away and his will is supposed to take over, right? I'm supposed to be a puppet for him now. What's the difference between now and then? I mean, wasn't it God's will then? I just wasn't calling it that. So what you're saying is you want me to lie to myself so that the idea and the beliefs that you give me resonate better. And I build that into a belief system of shame and fear of death, fear of relapse, fear of institutions, jails, or death, to control me so that I make it look like I'm having a spiritual experience. But funny, you call it a spiritual experience, but it's actually by the criteria that the rest of the world uses, not in AA, a religious experience. Imagine that. I'm going to give you an example really quick. Here we go. The myth of powerlessness. The first step of AA begins with a declaration. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. I could admit that I was powerless over gambling. I could say that I was powerless over Cheetos. I could say I'm powerless over Coca-Cola, right? The fact is, it doesn't matter why I'm saying that I'm powerless. The fact is, I am saying and bringing into the energy-wise, bringing into my current state, powerlessness. It doesn't matter what form. Powerless is powerless. It doesn't matter. If I take away my power, I am powerless. Right? So I'm not even, why would I get in that main? I'm gonna stop there, continue on. This statement has become the cornerstone of 12-step recovery, yet its origins are not purely psychological or medical, they are historical. In the 1930s, when AA was founded, addiction was poorly understood. The medical community often saw that it was moral failure rather than a treatable condition. So it was a magic spirit, right, that came down into you and or wasn't taught to you right. It had nothing to do with doctors and medication or anything like that, 100 years of psychological advancement and the betterment of the human being, and AA doesn't care. They just think it's spirit. The founders of AA, influenced by evangelical movements of the time, religious, adopted the language of powerlessness to emphasize surrender to God. Again, religion. It was less scientific claim than a theological one. Oh, religion. Psychology of externalizing agency. To declare oneself powerless is to externalize agency. Everything that makes you you. It shifts responsibility from the self to an external force. Again, not the self. Spirituality is the self. Religion would be something outside of self. Okay? Good. Karen with me? All right. Whether God, the group of drunks, or fate, this can feel relieving at first. The burden of control is lifted, but over time, Externalizing agency erodes empowerment. This is the psychologically what is happening, okay? Short-term relief. Admitting powerless can reduce guilt by framing addiction as beyond personal control. It's not, you don't have control over it. You are powerless over it. Oh, no, you had a choice. You just didn't know you had a choice. You couldn't see the choice, so you thought you were powerless over it. You were powerless to see and be aware that there was a choice. But you weren't powerless. You were just unaware. Long-term harm, continually affirming powerlessness undermines self-efficacy, the belief that one can change through personal effort. So it would stand to reason that when somebody that's running a group saying that he's going to college, is going for his master's, right? Literally believes that God did it. God did it. It had nothing to do at all with getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning, setting your alarm, right? Making sure that you had studied the night before, knew the information going into it by repetitively going over it and studying it, right? Going to class every single day, right? Getting there, making sure that you made it, didn't miss any classes, and took the tests. Because God didn't take the tests, right? No, you took the tests, but yet you think it was God that did it? It was you. In reality, where the rest of the world outside of AA lives, you did the work. Why are you giving the props to some words on a piece of paper when you are the one that physically did the work, not God? You did. Psychologically shows that recovery thrives when individuals believe they have agency. Powerlessness, repeated as dogma, religion, sabotages that belief. When you constantly reaffirm an idea or word, powerless, doesn't matter what you say you're powerless over. The idea of powerlessness relinquishes all power that you have because you're powerless. It doesn't matter what the fuck you say, it's over. You're powerless, you're powerless. Plain and simple. The brain doesn't know the difference between you saying you're powerless over alcohol, or you're powerless over eating too much chocolate, or gambling. It doesn't know the difference. It just knows that you're telling it to be powerless. Okay? AA promises freedom, serenity, and usefulness, yet it begins with powerlessness. This contradiction creates a paradox. Members are told they cannot control their addiction, yet they must control their behavior enough to attend meetings, work steps, and make amends. If you're powerless, how can you be responsible? If you cannot manage your life, how can you manage recovery? If only God can restore you, why do you have to do the steps? Why don't you just pray? Maybe that'll work. Just pray. Beg a little. Yeah, beg. How would you like it if your children were constantly begging you for shit, right? When you've given them everything that they need to excel in this world, right? You've given them logic, a brain that's capable of logic and reasoning. You've given them physical bodies so they can lift and do the work that they need to do and get to where they need to do. anything they want. They have an imagination that not only keeps them safe and protected, it also allows them to come up with ideas that will expand them as a human race, right? But no. What? No. Why on earth would you want that shit, right? Because all you got to do is pray. Praying helps. Praying helps you feel good, but does no fucking work. Let me give you an example. Here's one. I literally went from homelessness, having absolutely nothing, to having residual income, to having a housing for life, to having food, water, shelter, right in front of me. And all I had to do was the work, right? And I did that. Yep. Not one prayer did I ask. Not one prayer. In 2 years of being off heroin and fentanyl and shit. Not one prayer. You know why? Because I realized I did this. You are doing it. You are. Not a magic man in the sky. The contradictions are never resolved. Instead, members are told to accept both sides simultaneously. You're powerless, but you're responsible. You cannot manage your life, but you have to manage your recovery. Only God can restore you, but you have to do the work. They simultaneously accept both sides. The contradiction just cuts a hole, shortens, why can I not think of the word? Hijacked, it short circuits. The contradictions short circuit your logic and reasoning parts of the brain. They push these ideas through that give you two opposing beliefs to choose from. Cognitive dissonance puts them through the logic and reasoning things. And because the brain can only do one thing at one task at a time, when you're told to focus on, are you powerless? Yes, I'm powerless. But you're doing the work. Yes, I am. And nobody sees this contradiction. Nobody sees it in AA. And this is what I figured out today. The people that have worked the 12 steps allowed this cognitive dissonance to short circuit the brain and get these ideas implanted, because they're not just here and there, these contradictions. They are literally what it is made of. That's what allows it. That's why Milo could not tell the difference between religious experience and spiritual experience, because AA told him that a spiritual experience is the criteria of a religious experience. So they disguise religion as spirituality to get the religion out to as many people as possible while saying they're helping, creating a sense of codependency on the group. Because as we all know, there is actually no proof, like physical proof, like in reality, right? In reality, that God is actually here or exists at all, right? So because there is no proof when we go looking, guess who and what tends to be the end-all be-all for the as we understand them, right?